Kyle here from All Media Reviews. Here to do another progressive art rock, modern progressive art rock history, and so I'm doing my makeup at the beginning, like I've been doing on these videos. So starting with 1998, I didn't have any of the early Imogen Heap stuff, which I think she's an important artist in this style. Her first album, her I Megaphone, which I guess this wasn't the version that she originally recorded, never heard, but she was talking about that on a stream the other day, but I Megaphone came out on June 16th, 1998. Fun record though. A lot of it sounds a fair amount like Alanis Morissette. What is it? Angry Angel, especially that was one of the singles. Also, Come Here Boy, Getting Scared. So that was June 16th, 1998. Then the next year in June 99, I mentioned Archive. I didn't talk about the Londinium. I think I mentioned in the original video. Maybe I didn't. Londinium was like 95, but 98, an album that I've never heard before, they also released in June of 98 called Take My Head. Although it's their lowest rated album. A lot of people don't love this record, but that was June of 98, of 90, not 98, 99 rather. The British band Archive put that out. So moving along in the makeup list, Carnival, I talked about their debut album. It came out in 2005. But they had a few different EPs. The most notable being the Persona EP. Although a lot of it, that's the early Carnival is almost like new metal. But that came out on March 1st, 2001. So, but you know, it's still notable. Just like the first, like before Disassociative, Can't Believe It's Not Rock. It's worth noting just for the history. Uh, the most successful EP they had was in June, May 1st, or March 1st, 2001. But it would be another whatever it would be 4 years before their debut album Themata came out. Okay, and then Imogen Heap come again. It's not Imogen Heap's solo, but the collaboration she did with Guy Sigsworth, I believe his name is. The Frou Frou album Details came out on June 4th, 2002. You know, it's electronic pop, but you know, it's not. It's left of center pop. You know, that's why it's a little different. Everything she's done more or less has been very kind of artsy. So, song was used in, I believe it was in the soundtrack for Shrek. But anyway, that was June 4th, 2002. So it adds to the sort of depth of 2002. Um, Okay, so I hope I marked these. Yes, okay. So then moving on to 2004, I'm making it. I got two more on here that I didn't include, but um, this isn't an actual release, but it's a soundtrack, and it's the band Incubus plays on this Halo 3 soundtrack, which came out November 9th, 2004. This includes what would be these jewel cases, the Odyssey suite, which has a very strong King Crimson influence to it. I'm not that big of an Incubus fan, but they have a couple other records. I maybe including at least one or two of them. You can hear similarities with them and Caddisfly at points, and but they were doing full on prog when they were doing the Odyssey suite with Halo 3. So that was on uh, November 9th, 2004. Now, I don't know if I wrote down these last two. Okay, a couple of them. Uh, going on to 2005, the band Editors, they put out their debut album, The Back Room. The one after that, from 2007, I like more, and I'll be talking more about that. Yeah, they're kind of more in the post-punk, new wave, goth rock kind of style, like Interpol, or influenced by probably My Bloody Valentine and Joy Division, but I don't know. I always felt like they did something extra, and they did tour with Biffy Clyro at one point, so they get art rock points for that. So their debut album came out July 25th, 2005, The Back Room. Now, let's just see if I can find this stuff. I don't think I actually added it to the list. I have two more in here before I get going on 2006. Nope, I do not have that. So I'm going to have to do the old lookup thing. We got this album, so I'm not going in complete chronological order. But I'm going to be talking about this band again soon, but not on this video again. 2003, June 17th, 2003, I forgot to include the Woven album, 8-Bit Monk, which the truth is, when I was getting into Woven, this was the album that did the least for me, so it's not quite as important in terms of like the the style and like the prominent Woven records, but I really like Woven a lot. That it's worth mentioning in it. And this is the one you would find the most often at stores when I was looking for Woven. I would always see 8-Bit Monk, but a little bit like the Apex Theory. I would never find the Apex Theory CDs I wanted, but so that was June 17th, 2003. And then this band, which I'm about to talk about as well, I did talk about Malajube. Yeah, I forgot to include, I believe it's their um no, okay, my bad. This is supposed to go on the list. Okay. It may not be on my February. Yeah, this is one of the first records. That's why it was on my list. Is it on there? Yeah, it is. Okay. It was the first Malajube album I did talk about, but I thought it was actually in 2004. Yeah, it was. Les Comptes Complete. I think that's what this is. Yes, it is. Okay. This was not 2006. The titles are kind of hard to understand because it's French. November 2nd, 2004, the debut album from, Montreal's Malajube. The full account it translates to, which I've spent much less time with this record than any of the other albums, but again, they were sort of an experimental pop rock band, indie, alternative, college rock band. And yeah, they kind of had that. They're a product of where they came from. You could say bands like Most Serene Republic and some of the other Canadian sort of art rock, post rock bands shared similar qualities, but they sang in French and they had like a sense of humor about them. But anyway, so moving on and now we can finally get to 2006. The first album from 2006 was a very big album, and I remember it came out independently and later was released. And of course, the top of my vinyl got a little damaged. Paid an arm and leg for this thing. Mutemath's debut album after they put out, and they re-released it with the restated EP. I want to say later that year or in 2007. I want to say later in the year because it was independent, but came out January 19th, 2006. I saw them live like a month or two after that at the Ascot Room. But this is a fantastic debut album. Songs like Typical, Chaos, love the keyboard parts in that. Stare at the Sun, Break the Same is crazy. I mean, they're a better live band, but this debut album was hitting on a lot of cylinders. It sounded a lot like Sting or the Police, actually, because Paul Meany's vocal style reminded me a lot of the Police. But just found out he's like 2 weeks younger than or older than me or younger than me. He's born in July of 76. But Notice is another one. This is a fantastic debut album, and a channel with this podcast. I forget the name of it now. Taste the Music, not Taste the Music, but right, I forget, but they're really into Mutemath. It was kind of cool to find that the other day. I was subscribed to them. So that came out on January 19th. The week after that sees, I believe, the second album from, and probably their most successful, or somewhat most successful album, Tokyo Jihen's Adult, came out on January 25th, 2006. So, the year of 2006, well, I'll just say this right now. It wasn't as good as 2005. It wasn't as epic, but it started out really well. Yeah, let's see here. Yeah, it came out. I mean, it's bolded. Talk about my favorite song. There's a song called "The Best of" on it, but it's jazz pop. It's a step up from their debut in some ways. Some people love the debut, but Sheena Ringo, of course, doing lead vocals, and yeah, from Japanese rock music that's very artsy and jazzy. They stand out from the sort of J-pop that was getting really popular at that time, and then a few years later. So Adult came out. It was on January 25th, 2006. So moving on to February. I believe this is the second album from this band. But I don't know their first album. The band's called Far Less. I forget they're from somewhere on the West Coast, maybe. I could be wrong. But this is their second album called Everyone Is Out to Get You. I think it's Everyone Is Out to Get You. So the style, the handwriting, the font is not exact. Or Everyone's Out to Get No. Here it is. It's the writing is not exactly the most. And there's two different covers to this album, but this was not the first. The next album, which was their final album, kind of like another band we'll be talking about. This album I have spent less time with, and I've never heard the first album, Broken Hearts Unite, in 2003, but everyone's out to get us, not you. But yeah, I mean they're alternative rock, but they have some progressive leans. They use piano at points. They do some screaming, but they have nice clean vocals at points. I'm just wondering where they're from. No, they're from Virginia, not the West Coast. I was associated them with the West Coast for some reason, but yeah, I mean they weren't your run of the mill post hardcore band. That was kind of in the air where you're influenced by like Green Day or something like that, and then you also were influenced by Radiohead and Tool and maybe Muse at the time. So because I remember seeing a sticker comparing Far Less to Muse actually, but I haven't listened to this album in a long time. But it's worth noting. I should give it a go. Which came out on the second album from Far Less. Okay, Everyone Is Out to Get Us on February 7th, 2006. So the same day I was just talking about Malajube. Malajube did put out their second album. I was thinking I mentioned that, but maybe I hadn't. This was 2006. Optical Illusion is known, which I still don't lean toward this album compared to actually both the records that followed this. But I've always liked it. This got them the most exposure. It's probably their most well-known, most famous. The hipsters like this album the most. Yeah, I mean, think about it. This is art. Look how artsy this is. It's about a fish. You know, they were Malajube kind of got known to be sort of as the French Canadian fish band. You know, there's that band, that French film about that guy who turns into a fish or thinks he's turned into a fish. I saw years ago. But yeah, so Trompe-l'oeil, or known as Optical Illusion. I think Michelle Gondry should have done music videos for them, but she came out on the same day, February 7, 2006. So moving on, a few weeks later, sees probably their most successful, their most kind of trademark record, as much as I've talked about them on almost every one of these videos. But this was their peak. This is the album that introduced them to a bigger audience. Anathallo's Floating World record, which is an epic record. I mean, I came to learn a lot of these, like the song titles on this thing. I got them to sign them the one time I did see them live. Are all like Japanese, they're in Japanese. A lot of them are. There's some of them like Hoodwink but Hana Scott GG and Yuki 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 and Dokoi's House even sounds Japanese. There's a very big Japanese sort of literal influence here, and also from a lyrical standpoint, literally. Whatever. Musically, though, it takes what they were doing with Holiday at Sea and the other one before. Not so much hymns, but and kind of upped the game a lot. I mean, they had this large sound. It definitely was going more into chamber rock than they had before. And it's more progressive, frankly. And the only issue I've always had with this record, like, because Matt likes Sufjan Stevens, Matt Joint from Anathallo. He's up on the mic and swelling at points because he's singing so softly. But the horns are just fantastic in there. The dynamics. I mean, it's not heavy. I think their first album, Luminous is in the Atlas position is heavier. This was much more embracing this sort of chamber folk, but it's like chamber. Very much what the Family Crest would later do, and even Typhoon. But the drums that clap. This is a fantastic record that's beloved by so many people. And a Floating World, which came out on March 25th, 2006. But I didn't discover it till later. Not that much later, but so yeah, we're pulling out a lot of the obscure indie stuff in this episode. March 7th then saw the debut album, I believe it is, from one band, one Mason proper, and again, the origins of these bands, that's how well I know them. I apologize. I always think they're from the Midwest because like them, Far Less, the Ebb and Flow, they're from Michigan. So just like actually Anathallo was from Michigan, from Alpena, Michigan, but they currently reside in Ann Arbor, and they never actually officially broke up according to Rate Your Music, but There Is a Moth in Your Chest is the name of this record. And I got into these guys. I think I found one of their CDs, but yeah, this is the one I prefer. Aliox, yeah, I mean, Moth in Your Chest. This is kind of like Margot and the Nuclear Stone, so it's chamber rock, folky. I mean, you could put them in the same sort of category as some of Floating World, some of Anathallo, some of the other kind of folk chamber bands. I felt like they still had their own style to some degree with the vocals, and I went kind of apeshit over this for like a week back. It was December of 2008. The second album I didn't like quite as much, but I'm going to talk about that in a couple videos. But yeah, I mean, if talk about another buried, just like the ebb and flow. This is a Mason Proper is a buried treasure. Although I remember I revisited this and the other record a few years ago, thinking I used to love this, and I didn't like it as much as I had. But anyway, there's a Moth in Your Chest. Came out on March 7, 2006, the debut album from Mason Proper from Michigan. So then, next week, March 14th, 2006. I remember I was talking to a Dredge fan on MySpace when I heard about this band. Men, Women, Children, the self-titled and only album, the debut album and only album from, I think they were from one of the boroughs in New York. I think they were kind of contemporaries of a lot of those bands, including Apes and Androids, like MGMT and like Head Automatico. There's a lot of relationship with Head Automatico. Anyway, I mean, they're not. My wife likes this band. She's reminded of Duran Duran by them. Although you could say Duran Duran has had an influence, a big influence on Fiacra. But it's sort of like throwback 70s retro rock pop, funky at points, but there's some proggy elements in there with the fat synths, and I argue with my wife about what our favorites are. Dance in My Blood is the sort of token single that most people heard first, but my other two go-tos on this record are Celebration, which is great, and Lightning Strikes in New York. It's got that lyric, dance with me, but first put out that cigarette. She doesn't like those as much. Hers is messy, which is catchy, but I don't love the lyrics too much. They say boys are messy, but girls just make a mess. Or maybe it's the other way. They say girls are messy, but boys just make a mess. I got them to sign and stuff. Unfortunately, they were gonna do a second like album or project called Cubic Zirconium, but they had different vocalists. And it's too bad with Men, Women, and Children. They had so much potential. This album, the production's really good on it. They were like being courted by the people at Best Buy when I saw them. And they were touring with the band that did the album Daisy, that I never liked. Anyway, so or not so what, I forget. But Men, Women, Children, this kind of came out of nowhere. I was like, this isn't prog, but it's just fun, catchy music. I always kind of compared them to like Earth, Wind, and Fire, sort of in some ways. They were kind of funky, but they were artsy at the same time. It's gonna bug me the name of that band that they opened for. Then I saw them live. I missed part of that show, but I just remember there were reps from Best Buy and with the label. It's like you got to have your CD at Best Buy and all this. They were talking to the members of Men, Women, and Children. Damn it. Oh well, I'll think of it later. I'm sure. The band that put out the album Daisy that got really big, but I'll just look it up. Let's see. Brand new. The crowd were not there for Men, Women. Everyone was there for Brand New, and I never liked Brand New. Some people like them, anyway. So let's see. Am I not skipping anything over? Okay. Okay, that's not the right one. Next album we have on vinyl. That was March 14th. Men, Women, and Children put out their self-titled and only album. But then let's see here. The week after that, we saw two records. One being from like Kansas City. Kansas? Yeah, I've talked about them, but this is their peak record. Just like Anathallo, they had many records that preceded this. This is the Appleseed Cast's album Peregrine. And of course, it has the song February, but they're going full on post rock, atmospheric rock. They lost some of the sort of emo, Midwest emo. Yeah, I got won over by this, and I didn't find they ever put out anything as good or as artsy or progressive. They did some other stuff I liked, but this was Appleseed Cast, like peak Appleseed Cast. I'm just some of the drum work is great on this. It's the atmosphere, the textures, the title track, Mountain Halo, Ceremony, Woodland Hunter Part D. Yeah, Woodland Hunter Part 1 and Part 2, not Part D, Part 1 and Part 2. Yeah, Peregrine is, to me, the best thing they did. And in the pantheon of the history of post-rock, when they don't necessarily consider them a pure post-rock band, this is up there in the top records. If I ever do like a post-rock list, this will definitely be included. So this came out on the 21st of March, 2006. ruin that. You know, yeah, they shared qualities with Mutemath. You could say that for sure. So the same day, the debut album and the only standard full-length album they released, unfortunately, but it did get a little bit of attention. It got written up in, I think it was alternative press and everything. Opus Dai is this CD's barely cracked. Tierra Tigrame, Tigram, with their original singer, I think his name was Chris Brown. Oops. I saw them live. While there's a little bit of a sameness to this album has great energy and great dynamics. Ember's Firefly, it's very much in the heavy art rock, in the sort of Fair to Midland, and they're friends with Fair. They like had a relationship with Fair to Midland. One of the members of Opus Dei eventually became a touring member of Fair to Midland. Fair to Midland, Carnival, later Dead Lord Circus, the Apex Theory. But yeah, Opus Dei, they kept on talking about a second album. They put out an EP a couple years later with a different singer, but their guitarist is great. I think he's originally from like Japan, but yeah, Opus Dei, unfortunately, they got a little bit of attention for like a window of like 6 months to a year, and then they put out an EP, and then that was it basically. And they were on Facebook talking about an update, and they never put out the next record. But Tierra Tigrame from Opus Dei came out the same day as the Appleseed Cassis Peregrine on March 21st, 2006. So then the next, just like 6 days later, saw the return of Phenomena with an all-instrumental work called Under an Hour, which I'm waiting for them to issue on vinyl. 3 pieces, 17 minutes and 29 seconds to 18 minutes and 42 seconds. My least probably listened to Phenomena record, maybe other than the last one, the less proper one, Moms, maybe. However, I don't say like it definitely warrants it. Like it was them going full on prog, like going full on post rock, going full on Godspeed You Black Emperor. I mean, just look at it. Music for modern dance, parental advisory, explicit content. They were just being funny. I always consider that to be a sort of a humor thing, but yeah, it's fun. It's nice. It's atmospheric. It sounds like it's for a soundtrack for a film or something like that. But I'm a huge Phenomena fan, of course, and they're a really important band in progressive art rock in the 2000s, especially. And that came out on the 27th of March 2006. So moving on to the next month, April. Really big release, of course. One that I think I'd known about a little while earlier. That was the whole day and age of months early kind of stuff showing up online on the blogs. Pure Reason Revolutions, The Dark Third. And I'd been pimping them for several months after hearing about them through the Porcupine Tree Forum, myself and some other people. And I talked about it in the Pure Reason Revolution series. The 2006 version, the version that came out in March of 2006 was the UK version, which had Twinston Trembling Willows, which the version that came out later in the US did not, but it's a trade-off. Then you got Nimbos and Tambos on the US version, which wasn't on there. But I mean, I've talked about it. It's a fantastic record. It has the Pink Floyd element. It has the sort of astral folk, the Zeppelin riffs at points, the Apprentice of the Universe. Everyone loves the Bright Ambassadors of Morning. If it wasn't for like that 2-minute section where the bass line goes on for a little while and the fat synths, it would be a perfect track. Voices in Winter, crazy vocal harmonies, crazy fast vocal riffs. Bullets Dominate is a great ballad. There's just so many tracks on there. It's unbelievable. And it basically, at that point, while all the other records came out, including Mutemath, I was really into. I hadn't heard Anathallo at that point. This took the #1 spot that year for me in 2006, and it won the prize for the album of the year. For rightfully so, though I've never considered it a perfect record, but it's damn close, and it's still the best record they ever did. So that came out on the 10th of April in 2006. So a week later, sees the debut album, I believe. I think it's the debut album from one singer-songwriter, very much channeling Jeff Buckley, a guy named Scott Matthews. His debut album, Passing Stranger. British guy, but, I mean, while I'm guilty of not wanting to listen to copycat artists, very kind of derivative, aping artists, sometimes it just bugs the bejesus out of me and I can't get into it. Like Portugal the Man, and there's some other examples. I felt like the songwriting was still good enough despite the Jeff Buckley similarities. More overtly like Jeff Buckley than anything Jimmy Necco ever did, or Muse. But I haven't listened to this album in a long time. It's got 17 tracks. But yeah, I mean, my Jeff Buckley fandom, I've always looked for artists that at least were influenced by him, and he hasn't done anything I've liked nearly as much since. He's done a few records that have been okay. I think he has an album called Elsewhere, maybe. But this is his masterpiece. You know, I'm not obsessed with it, but I've always liked it. A little bit of Nick Drake or Elliott Smith in there too. But Passing Stranger came out on the 17th of April, 2006. Because, you know, the Jeff Buckley thing, it's definitely artsy. So then the 4 days later sees the sophomore record from OSI, Free, which at the time I liked like 3 songs. I revisited this a couple of years ago and liked it a little more. But I've always felt like with OSI and the debut album, they totally hit the nail on the head with the mixture of samples and atmosphere. This album didn't use any samples. And the presence, like Portnoy's presence, wasn't any barely on it. He did play on it, but was it Go and the song that goes last one to the bottom? Those are the two like go-tos, but still a decent record. I think it's better than the records that followed it, unfortunately. But anyway, that came out on the 21st of April, 2006. So that first quarter had a fair number of good records, being PRR, Anathallo, and Mutemath. Those were the big guns. Then you had some others that were in there, where with Tokyo Jihen and Mason Proper, the Men, Women, Children. There was a lot of good records that first quarter. Actually, the first quarter ended in March. I'm kind of messing. I'm thinking of the first quarter being in April. So then in May, I've talked about them, of course, and I'm still including them just for their importance and influence. Tool's 10,000 Days came out on May 2nd, 2006. People love this album. I remember that was the first Tool album that I sort of paid attention to, but still didn't get that into it. But, you know, people love it, and that just is notable for the history on May 2nd, 2006. So then, 8 days later, Vast followed up Nude with April, an album that I probably have only listened like once, and it's not nearly as well known, but among the rest of the Vast catalog after Nude, it's the most rated on Rate Your Music, so it sort of still goes there. Probably the most successful album he's had since, and he hasn't had any, you know, there haven't been any Vast album that's been as successful as that since. But anyway, that was May 10th, 2006. So then another kind of important record, and unfortunately it's one of the only records I really like from this band. I've never opened it up. I should have. May 16th, 2006 sees the debut album from what I would call this post-metal. You know, the records that have come since, the one after it was, but this is Enter from Russian Circles, came out on May 16th, 2006. Very well crafted, flows really well. Songs like Micah, Carpe, and Death Rides a Horse. Heavy, punchy riffs, textured, no vocals. It sounded like somewhat like instrumental Rush or Fate's Warning in some ways. I was kind of going past that, but I felt like not the one after that, but the one after that, they were basically kind of drawing too much on the Explosions in the Sky style of post music. But other bands came along and did things that I liked that kind of filled that void. But I think this album is heavy enough to call it post-metal. You could call it post-metal or heavy post-rock. Chicago's own Russian Circles, which I think the members had been in. I'm just thinking of Minus the Bear, that band Botch. But anyway, Enter from Russian Circles came out on May 16th, 2006. So, all right. So then we have, I'm going to include this artist. I don't like all the stuff from him, but this is the one I want to have on vinyl. May 21st, 2006, Gortia, as I say his name. People want to say Gautier. I saw it pronounced Gortia, Gotye. I believe it's his second album. The first album, I don't remember, but it's Like Drawing Blood. And this is way more experimental than actually the one that followed that won the Grammy, that Kim Rose on, of course, that I have. But there's a couple songs on here I think of. There's one song where he's like working in a call center. It's like, you know, I don't know what, I can't help you. I just work here, you know? But yeah, you could hear some of the texture, some of the rhythms. He was a fan of King's X and Dream Theater, and, you know, he's a drummer and a singer. Learn a little, little given a lovin'. That's just one word. But yeah, I mean, it went under the radar then he won the Grammy, and then everyone started checking this out. And I'm guilty of that. I didn't know about him until he won the Grammy. It was 2011 for me. He got more popular in 2012. But Night Drive, yeah, I mean, it's pop music, but it was definitely more experimental. Kind of reminds me some of Silverchair, actually, some of that period of Silverchair at least. So So that came out on May 21st, 2006. The next day, Archive followed up, I believe it was Noise, that soundtrack. I think it was Noise, actually, with their album Lights, which is the first album that I heard from them, actually, which has, like, I think it's the title track, which is kind of an epic. I always kind of felt like it was a second tier Archive album or third tier. Although I haven't listened in many years, it's still not bad. I mean, it's better than that second album I just mentioned a little while ago from 1999. But Lights came out on May 22nd, 2006. So moving on to June, I largely heard about this through the hipsters, through like, um, following the hipster community. It wasn't Pitchfork. I've never read Pitchfork, but only when I've referenced to it. But it was on the Current. I think I first heard this band, and then the second album from Midlake, The Trials of Van Ocupanther. Of course, it has the hit Roscoe, which sounds the opening track, which sounds a lot like Fleetwood Mac. But I've come to believe that this album is very good, beginning to end. Songs like Young Bride, Van Ocupanther. It covers the hillsides. This is a great record, and yeah, no, I think it's probably still their best record. Actually, it's close, but anyway, um, that came out on June 5th, 2006. So moving on, after Midlake Trials Van Acupanther on June 5th, moving into July, Muse released this would be their fourth album, I think. Yeah, fourth album, Black Holes and Revelation, on July 3rd. Remember, this was a big deal when it came out, and they were playing Supermassive Black Hole, some of the dredge form, Supermassive, um, Supermassive Ball of Jet or something like that. But having gone through the Muse catalog last year, I can now conclude that this is my favorite Muse album, and the production's even better than on Absolution. Songs like Map the Problematic, City of Delusion, and of course the sort of big epic, Western sounding Knights of Sidonia, among the best stuff on there. Starlight has become a radio hit. It's played on lots of places. Take a Bow, the opening, Invincible, Assassin. Although I thought that Assassin and one of their songs sounded similar, but and Supermassive Black Hole isn't bad. One of the comments was like, the new Timberlake song, but at the time. But yeah, this came out in July 3rd, 2006. So then, let's see here. Yeah, the rest of July we didn't have much of anything that I could find. Then in August, saw the debut album and the Alone album, like Men, Women, and Children, Under the Influence of Giants only album, very kind of 70s, funk, R&B, disco almost some ways, but very catchy melodies, and it's artsy enough. The huge hit Mama's Room, even though a huge hit at the time, it was played in bars and stuff like that, and I saw them live. They opened for Mutemath, and they headlined at least once, maybe twice. I saw them, and Aaron Bruno, I think, and then they never did a second album. He formed another band. It's not like Under the Influence of Giants, but In the Clouds was another one. They were just very melodic, very catchy, very energetic, very fun. Without being too dumb, being sort of sellout pop music of the 2000s. This didn't sound like Timberlake. It's channel. I know the drummer was had like a connection with either Hall & Oates or Steely Dan. I forget one. It was like maybe his uncle had played with Steely. I forget. But the bass player looked like Wolfman Jack and wore a headband and would start doing like live. He would use his knees. He'd like do knee ups. But they were a fun. I loved Under the Influence of Giants. This first album, this debut album, their only album, is a great record and sort of artsy enough to fit sort of within the scope. It wasn't prog. I remember asking the bass player, it's like, "Are you guys into progressive rock?" It's like, isn't that like Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds? Anyway, who can be considered art punk, I guess. I'm not a fan of Nick Cave. I couldn't include them, but so that was on August 8th. Then that's all I have for August, actually. But then we got a big fall, or September, starting in September. On September 12th, we had 3 albums that came out. And I don't have these. 4, actually. Yes, okay. I'm doing these in the right order. I think so. three on the 12th of September, then one on the 26th. So the first is the debut album and the only album from this band who later changed their name to something else, to Other Lives. Oklahoma's Kunik and their album Flight of the Flins. The debut album from Oklahoma art rockers Kunik offers 12 songs that reflect the theory that music is a delicate intersection of science and emotion, at times organic, dynamic, buoyant, and ethereal, but always moving. I saw them as Other Lives, got them to sign that. I know I turned down a few people from the Casfly fan base onto them, and they came here a few times as Other Lives, but I liken this album to being kind of like a very mellow, almost dreamy, sort of drug-induced Pink Floyd, like the pre-Dark Side Pink Floyd, very like Obscured by Clouds, metal, more soundtrack, Adam Hart Mother influenced Pink Floyd. I guess you could even throw in Piper and Saucerful, but I haven't listened to this album in a long time. Songs like Coma and Bright Eyes and All Together. There's like these different sections. Section 2. Good Day. Good Day, I think, is the closing epic, and it's kind of uplifting, yet the vocals are very kind of sleepy and slow. It's not music you're going to dance to, not music you're going to get energy to. It's more of sort of relaxing, dreamy, trippy kind of music, but not too much. It's not over the top. This is not Tame Impala, but Kunik, in fact, I should have included them. I don't know if I did in the Pink Floyd list, the influence bands, but Flight of the Flins, the first of 3 albums on the 12th of September, 2006. So then, the same day, of course, saw I think it's the first proper solo album. He had done some stuff after Jellyfish, Beatnik Baked and Jellyfish were over. He'd done Imperial Drag, I want to say, and he might have been part of the Greys, I can't remember, but, and one other project, I want to say. But Roger Joseph Manning Jr.'s of Jellyfish, most notably, and then later Licorice Quartet and some other things. He played a member of like Beck and someone else even bigger than Beck. I'm forgetting. But The Land of Pure Imagination, which I know this came on September 12, 2006 as well. Came on vinyl. I've seen it. It's kind of pricey. I like this album. I don't love it, but I like it enough. It's probably the best sort of post Jellyfish album for the most part that's come out. But that I don't want to overrate. I mean, it's of the ilk, but again, with Jellyfish, part of the magic is Andy Sturmer's vocals, and so he's a great complimentary vocalist, Roger Joseph Manning Jr. But the title track, it's on here, Pray for the Many, Dragonfly. It's kind of a concept album of sorts, but anyway, yeah, I mean, decent record. It's funny, I got this on September. It was actually received on September 12th to Cheapo. So the third one on September 12th is the album that I just showed the other day that I picked up on vinyl, which was a big deal because, of course, they had Amputecture, they had Francis the Mute before that, and that was such a massive album for a lot of people. But Amputecture from the Mars Volta, the final album with the original drummer John Theodore, came out on September 12, 2006. And its best moments are great, but again, I've said I haven't yet. I need to revisit it. The Sarah Eyes and Vermicide are my 2 go-tos. I always like the artwork on this record. Yeah, I mean, it's very epic. It meanders. It's a lot of kind of bass, like blues rock, kind of Zeppelin-esque riffing, but goes off into sort of like Can territory, or like it gets avant-garde at points. But I'm not repulsed by it as much in some ways for the record that followed it, for different reasons. But yeah, Amputecture also came out on September 12th, 2006. So those 3 records, Kunik, Flight of the Flins, Roger Joseph Manning Jr., and the Mars Volta on September 12th. And 2 weeks later, to the day, on the 26th of September 2006, sees the debut release and the first sort of proper album, some people consider a mini album, or like the Pure Reason Revolution release from the year before. But it's like 35 minutes. The Deer Hunter. After Casey Crescenzo had departed the Receiving End of Sirens, he had been doing this music like before he even was in the band, Receiving End of Sirens, but he opened with them. But Act 1, The Lake South, The River North. I didn't hear this. It was a few months later, because as I did the research, it was like January of 2007. But I've come to love this thing. Most fans love this thing, although the only criticism is it's not long enough. But it has City Escape, Super Mars Volta element on that song, 1878. His Hand Matches Tongue is a banger. It's the because I got the whole band to sign it at the time at least. Uh, Songs like The Pimp and the Priest. It's got its charm. It's got its sort of production. Casey sounds great. You know, yes, it's got the axe sound. So you would listen to this, and there's definitely differences in what they're doing now. Some almost 20 years later to the axe series. But yeah, I've always had a soft spot for this album. I don't consider it their best, but it's so less is more in some ways. 35 minutes go by, and you're like, oh, I could definitely go more of that. But anyway, Casey Crescenzo, baby project, which became a full-time band. The Lake South, the River North, from the Deer Hunter, DEAR, on the 26th of September. So then, on October 2nd, just a couple weeks after that, like a lot of these big releases came out later in the year, actually. I'll go through the summary in just a minute once I finally finish this epic video. But the Decemberists masterpiece, their best record for me and most prog fans, The Crane Wife, which includes the suite of sorts, The Island. That is a masterpiece of like 13-minute prog rock. Very Pink Floydy, very Jethro Tull-ish, kind of Yes-like at points. It's got the Crane Wife suite as well, which is part 1, part 2, and part 3, which part 3 is the first part. Yankee Bayonet, Oh Valencia, The Perfect Crime sounds like Genesis, like 80s Genesis. It's really Shankill Butcher. I mean, that's a ballad. When the War Came. I like every track on this album. I feel like it's kind of hit on all cylinders. And they were doing prog in a really good way. The folk rocks or some chamber instrumentation. Colin sounds great. The sort of lyrics kind of fit with the sort of concept of the Crane Wife. Those tales, these folk tales. It's like Japanese folk tales and stuff like that. But you can see the members of the band. Yeah, the Crane. I saw them on that tour. That's when I became a fan from this album. That was on October 2nd, 2006. 2 weeks later from that, on the 14th of October 2006, sees the final record from Scotland's Aeriogram, My Heart Has a Wish That You Would Not Go. Their finest record, their swan song I just mentioned, tracks like Barriers, Exits, The Running Man, very textured rock, kind of like Porcupine Tree or Archive in some ways, or a lot of these other bands that put out records this year. They weren't as heavy because their early stuff was more stoner almost, but they kind of found the balance with this. Of course, the members would go on to be part of churches. They did a band after Aeriogram broke up. I forget the name of it. It wasn't quite as good. I might include it on the calendar, but anyway, Aeriogram's My Heart Has a Wish That You Would Not Go, originally released on the 14th of October 2006. This big fall 2006 sweep of albums. So then it was 4 days later, Japan's own, kind of a short-lived band career, small discography, but their debut album from Japan's own, female-led, sort of math rock, math pop, post-rock, kind of dream pop, Kasika, self-titled album, came out on the 18th of October 2006. While I prefer the one that followed it, this album actually has more edge to it in some ways. Sounds like Picasso and My Page, Clay Anime. I've always liked this. I like the textures they use. It's a little less mathy. It's kind of like taking Bjork singing with a J-pop band, doing kind of mathy music. That's kind of a vague description. I think the singer, which I follow her, I forget her name. The singer, there's a booklet. There is a booklet in here. Yeah, unfortunately, Kasika, you can actually, unlike Mutemath, they had distribution. Of course, all the lyrics are Sensibility Cube, and they did remixes of this album later. I recall, but it doesn't have the band credits on this thing. This is more of a budget-based booklet, but I like it. You can see. Anyway, I'm not even sure the area of Japan they're from, Tokyo or where exactly, but. Kasika, they actually got distribution through CD Baby at the time. I wish Mutemath did, but they didn't. But that was on the 18th of October 2006. And I had these flipped. So the day before, I didn't put that in the right order. Saw the debut album from, I believe they're from North Carolina. Another band that had a pretty short window, but they were good while they lasted. They toured a bunch of times. Annuals, not the Annuals. Annuals, Be He Me. Singer has a very poppy element, like vocal style, kind of higher pitched. Adam Baker, but he's a big fan of Mike Patton, ironically. But the whole band are fans of Yes too. They kind of remind me of a few bands, but textured pop really, and they were written up in alternative press. But this is their best record, although the record after has some of their best songs. But songs like Brother, Dry Clothes, Carry Around, Bleary Eyed, Ida My, very dreamy, kind of fun, energetic. They have like drum jam, like hand clapping, and some some external percussion. Behemi is a great debut album. A lot of great debut albums this year. Under the Wings of Giants, Men, Women, Children, Kunik. So that was on the 17th. So they came up back to this. So you had whatever Aerogrom, Annuals, and Kasika all putting out albums that week of the 14th through the 18th of October. So then on the 24th, a week later, and I believe it was around the time I saw them, they had copies of this. Maybe they had copies beforehand, because it was the same night I saw Mew, I think I got this. But Caddis Fly, because they had already recorded and finished, and they had to push back their follow-up album from By Your Attention by Unicorn. They put out an EP called the Four Seasons EP, prologue to Set Sail the Prairie. It has one extra track which wasn't on Set Sail the Prairie or any other releases. It was what was it? Games, which is very catchy and poppy. And I know the band had mixed feelings about it, but I really like Games. And of course, it's like a sampler for Set Sail the Prairie. I mean, it's and By Intention was a great record, but Set Sail the Prairie was leaps and bounds even better. And this is a great mixture of songs from Campfire, Empire, Silk Road, Mercury. Yeah, one song represents each season. So I remember this is hard to find. I don't think you can find. It'd be really hard to press to find. Maybe some people are selling on Discogs, but that came out on the 24th officially of October 2006. Day after, I mentioned Mutemath. Like Kasika, they were a short-lived band, but great sort of Japanese post-rock band. Their debut album, self-titled debut album, came on the 25th of October. Unfortunately, I have to pay an arm and a leg to get it to the States to buy a copy on CD. But this album, compared to the one after it, came out the year after, was more jazzy from memory. A little heavier, but I haven't listened to this one nearly as much as the one after it. So it's a similar case with Kasika and Mutemath, where they put out impressive debut albums, but they would follow them up with better second albums. But that came out on the 25th of October 2006. So then to round out October of 2006, if I'm not thrown off here. Oh no, I have it on CD. I don't on vinyl. Sees the debut album from one Brian Scary and the Shredding Tears, self-titled album, which I've only been listening to this for like maybe a year and a half, and I haven't listened to it that many times. I like the records he put out more later, but it does have its punk edge, but it still has that sort of cabaret power pop and some progressive elements. The ELO elements and influence is still there. It's just he hadn't really refined everything about his style, but for a debut album, self-titled album, it has its charm. Macedonia Hotel, Shredding Tears all over the place. How they got the name. Mrs. Gracie, Revenge. Reminds me of Call Phones, Paul's Valerie's Revenge. Holding on George, Riding the Shadow. Yeah, I mean, I've grown to love them, but this is probably, to me, the weakest full-length album from Brian Scary, and that's kind of saying it's not a bad album. It's just, it's more raw, like a lot of debut albums. But that came out on of all days, Brian Scary and the Shredding Tears. Brian Scary on Halloween Day, 2006, October 31st. So moving on to November, and it sees, I don't put a lot of live albums in here, but I'm making an exception because this is a special live album. Dredge's Live at the Fillmore, which includes songs that weren't on any record. The Warbler and what was it? Not Of the Room. Stone by Stone. Stone by Stone's a big highlight. But, Dredge are a special band. It's got a lot of the Catch Without Arms stuff, of course. The Ornament. A lot of the stuff from El Cielo, too. It's a mixture. Triangle, Sans End, Same Old Road, Ode to the Sun. Yeah, and it's very live. They have this great energy. at the Fillmore theater in Northern California. So Dredge live album on November 7th came out 2006. I had been to Santa Cruz to see them twice. They it wasn't taken from those shows, but it was kind of around the same era, same period I saw them. I saw them a couple times within that period of time. So that was on November 7th, and the same day sees the follow-up EP a little bit like what Caddisfly did for Fair to Midland, and the first release they released under Surgical Strike Records, Serge Tankian from System of Down's label, the Drawn in Quarter EP, which includes a video of it's like a video bio thing of Fair to Midland talking about them. How the keyboard Matt Langley joined the band. It's got Orphan Anthem 86, a much more polished version. It's original demo, but it sounds more polished to me than the version even that's on Inner Front of Stifle. And then Kyla Cries Cologne, Seafarer and Nod, and Abigail Live. Kyla Cries Cologne, the demo. But yeah, it's fun EP. Just like Caddisfly, they would have bigger and more at like sort of ambitious plans the next year, but it was just like a sort of a taste or a sample or a preview of what would happen in the next year. So let's see here. And then so I've got 3 more releases, but none of them I couldn't track down any actual release dates. So the band at the Ebb and Flow, I talked about their debut album. They put out an EP called Here Are Caught, which is grammatically not that accurate, but I haven't listened to this in a long time. I bought this March of 2008, but I guess between the 3 things I have from them, this is the weakest, but it's an EP. I don't think any of the songs on here made their next record, but I could be wrong. I don't know their catalog by heart, but Framed. Yeah, that actually was on. I think that was on Time to Echolocate, actually. So I'm wrong about that. Window Porter remix, the third Window Porter the 3 remix, Magic Surprise remix, a bunch of remixes. So just to follow their limited catalog. And then I have one other physical copy. Sees the debut, another EP a debut EP from House of Fools, North Carolina band who would release a couple records after this before ending their career, unfortunately. But band I love. They this has Live and Learn, which was the title of the album they would release the next year. My Life Before Today, Better Part of Me. Now it has doesn't have the demo of Live. I don't think it's the demo because the demo they had on their MySpace, but they talked about it in Alternative Press. Them and Annuals were both in Alternative Press that year, I believe. I could be wrong. I know they were in Alternative Press talking about Alice in Wonderland, about their debut album Live and Learn, but this was a sampler just like Caddisfly. So you had a bunch of bands, House of Fools, Caddisfly, and Fair to Midland, put out in effect what were like previews or samplers of what their big full-length album the next year. So the last one is the Most Serene Republic put out an EP called Phages. So I know the House of Fools EP though came out in the fall. I don't know about that Ebb and Flow record and the EP in the Most Serene Republic, but that Phages EP from the Most Serene Republic is pretty highly rated. I've never heard it, but so that's it for 2006. It was a good year. Just to summarize, it was not as good of a year, as epic and ambitious and sort of big scale year as 2005. But I think you find that it kind of was the gift that kept on giving. A lot of these albums have held up, and a lot of them were, even though a lot of these bands aren't around anymore, it was great in that year or a few years after when they were discovered. So anyway, that's it for 2006. I'll go on to 2007, hopefully in the next few days. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.